But it's difficult now because to keep your guys awake is going to be a tough ask after lunch. So I'll have to throw some more stress balls at you to keep you awake. Okay. Good. One of the questions that came up during the break was making the sales pitch. And how do I find out people? Everyone was asking me, he says, I make chemicals. How do I find customers? How do I find more customers? I know in India it's a little difficult because it's not so organized. Anywhere else in the world you could buy a list of soap manufacturers of India, a list of steel manufacturers of India. Contact any association like the Ludhiana Management Association, make a hefty donation. Yeah, they're available. That's the best method of getting in people, getting in leads. Because every one of your industrial products, whether it's steel, whether it's chemical, whether it's leather, would go to specific industries for specific purposes, right? So the best method is to do what we call data mining, using members directories, using associations, clubs, street directories, neighborhoods, whatever directories you can find. If you can't do this and you have the money, appoint a market research agency. They will do a census survey for you. They charge you an arm and a leg and they will give you the information. But if you've got the money to spend, that's the way to do it. If you don't have the money to spend, very simply, get a guy, a college student, an intern, pay him 5,000 rupees a month, give him a computer or laptop, tell him to go to Google and download all the names and websites of all the companies manufacturing, let's say, soap, or let's say detergents, or what business are your clients from? What clients? Spinning and dyeing. So go to Google, say spinning plus dyeing plus India, and you'll get lists and lists and lists. Let us sort through those lists. That's the cheapest way you can find out new leads, new customers. Right? Okay. There are different ways of prospecting for a cold call. If you're doing cold calling, send a note, send a letter, a direct approach, a research approach. The way I told you, doing a census survey or a market research. When you're cold calling, if you actually have to make a cold call, this is for the young guys who are going to, like, say, go out for the first time, what to do? First is be prepared. Carry as much information as you can. You don't want to look like a fellow who doesn't know anything about his product or business. And if you don't know something, don't bullshit. Say, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'll get back to you within a week. Or I'll get back to you tomorrow, by tomorrow evening. And that's a good excuse to go back and get the information. It gives you a second foot in the door. Because the first one is the most difficult foot to get. Accept the nerve, don't take the rejection personally, because it's always difficult to break the ice and get through the first time. First time you do something, it's tough. The second time, it's slightly easier. Third, fourth time, you become a pro at it. That's why you have people knocking on your door, calling you up and making so many sales calls. Imagine, what's the worst that can happen? He will reject you, he'll throw you out. Okay? Don't worry about it. Knock on the next door. Rejection is part of cold calling. Remember, each call will bring you closer to a sale. And each sale brings you closer to your goal. Cold calling is the first job any sales guy gets. I did it in my life. And that is where I got sandpapered. I got properly sandpapered. Cold calling. It's the worst thing to do. You get beaten and battered and bruised. And the only proof I have of cold calling are these bonds on my palm. You know from where? I used to sell nuts and bolts, and I had to carry samples of those nuts and bolts. My bag would weigh about 15 kilos. So I had to carry that bag, and I wouldn't weigh much. At that time. Carrying 15 kilos and doing cold calling is where you learn selling. Okay? So if you've done that in your life, you know what I'm talking about. Is the mic working? Is the mic working? Not working. Is that better? No? Better? There's only one way to get these things to work. I think we lowered the volume. Okay, so getting to the decision making. If the person you're cold calling isn't there and the receptionist won't let you in, what to do? Send an email. You've got email working. But writing an email is also an art. I hope I've got something there to show you. Bit of trivia. Which is the most important part of an email? Yes, sir. You must be sending hundreds of those every day. The subject line. Absolutely right. If you can't write an apt subject, your email will never get read. I get about 40 or 50 emails per day, and I don't read more than 3 or 4 of them. The only way I decide which one to read is either from the sender's name or the subject. If I recognize the sender, okay. If the subject is interesting enough, okay. Anything beyond that goes straight to the spam. So, you must remember when you're sending emails and trying to get a foot into the door, get your first appointment, you should have an attractive enough subject. Addressing the prospect, always address them by name. That's the way you build a personal rapport. Opening call, the key is to build credibility and interest. So try and establish interest and credibility both in the first sentence. Good morning, Mr. Singh. My name is Hansel D'Souza. I represent the world's largest rice bran oil manufacturer. Where are those guys from? They're somewhere around. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Singh. My name is Hansel D'Souza. I make people's teeth look beautiful. Alright? Good morning, Mr. Singh. I manufacture chemicals that make steel strong. Okay. Establish credibility and interest quickly in the first sentence, because no one's got time to waste nowadays. You need to establish yourself in the very first sentence when you're making a call. Identify the decision maker. Are you talking to the right guy? Very important. You don't want to spend half an hour there and discover that he's the wrong chap. He's the fellow looking after the pantry. It's not worth your time. So figure out first thing whether he's the right guy. Is he a right prospect for your product or service? Find out what he values most. Build a rapport. Dress for success. You see, in India, first impressions, like anywhere else in the world, are extremely important. We normally size up people from the way they are dressed. And we kind of know how much time to spend with them, depending on how they seem to us. So sometimes in sales, dressing and first impressions are extremely important. Mirroring gestures while you're speaking. What is the prospect really interested in? Well, handling objections. This is something that is one of the most difficult tasks that a sales guy faces, of how to handle objections. Remember, whenever someone raises an objection, he's actually doing that to clarify the point he wants to make, or to clarify the point that you've just made. So an objection is not really telling you that you're an idiot, because nobody is going to waste time telling you that. He's just trying to tell you that, listen, I want more information. So you need to listen carefully whenever there's an objection, because hidden behind that objection is a great opportunity to communicate information. When my friend Tejinder stood up a while ago and talked about his biscuits that burn and he raised some little objection, it was a God-sent opportunity for me to impart a lot more information based on his example. And he felt happy after that, we all felt happy after that, right? Same thing happens in a sales call. For instance, I say, okay, so why do you think you are the world's largest rice bran oil brand? And then you have a chance to tell them, well, sir, we have a solvent extraction plant down at Dhuri, which is the largest plant. We produce 600 tons per day, etc., etc., etc. And nowhere else in the world do you have so much of rice bran produced as in Sangrur. Therefore, we've set up shop there, and this is what we do with the world's finest technology. Now you've got a chance through that objection to tell them 15 other things that are going to establish your credibility as a seller. Okay? So remember, objections are something welcome. something you must be happy about. If you went to a sales call without a single objection, go home and cry. You're never going to get that order. Okay, so check that you've understood it, answer the objection. How to deal with people? Raising objections. Try and deal with them with as professional a manner as you can. Don't argue or tell people they're wrong. You're not there to score brownie points. You're not there to go and tell people how little they know. You're there to sell. So the first thing I always tell is somewhere there coming up walking. Alright. Somewhere there. The first lesson I learned when I went to a sales training program was a very, very seasoned person who said, a salesman never says no. He always begins every sentence with a yes. I said, that's not possible. So many guys when I go to make sales call, they say, hey, can you give us 60 days credit? And I stop and say yes. Hey, can you give us a 40% discount? Do you say yes? Do you say yes? You're selling your chemicals. Do you say yes? What do you say first thing? Say no? First you will say no, and then you will convince him that 40% discount is bad for his health. Yes? Yes, sir? Well, it works this way. Come on, you say, you ask me for something impossible. Ask me for something. You do that. You ask, I'll decide. He says, okay, you spend the rest of the evening with me in my place this evening. That's what he says. I'll say, yes, of course, I'd love to do that. Unfortunately, I have a couple of meetings lined up. But the next opportunity I get, I'll definitely visit you and spend time with you. I don't say no at all. You notice that? I never use the word no. But most often, we start with a no and end up agreeing. So the trick here in selling is to start with a yes and end up doing just the opposite. Let's do it again. Let's see these ladies. They ask tough questions. Say something difficult. Ali, shoot. Will you design an ad campaign free for me? Of course I'll do that, Professor Kavita. You're such a charming and wonderful person. Unfortunately, I have my art director and my staff back home who earn a salary, and like you, their families depend on it. I'm sure you wouldn't want them to starve for a free ad campaign. You're such a kind person, aren't you? Therefore, I will give it to you at a special price. I normally charge 1 lakh rupees for an ad campaign, but because you are Professor Kavita, it will come to you for only 75,000. Alright? I never said no. Did I? So, a good salesperson, and that holds for the director sales or for the trainee sales rep. Anybody who's in this business of selling should begin his sentence with a yes and then but, hence, however, unfortunately, maybe, probably, could be, possibly, but never start with a no. The moment you start with a no, you've created an adversary. You've created someone, you've put the guy on the opposite side of the table. So it's so nice to start with a yes. And that's the spirit a good salesman carries with him. Alright? You remember that? Start with a yes. And remember, don't end with that yes. Otherwise you'll be giving away everything and coming back and blaming me. Don't argue or tell people the wrong. Don't talk negatively about competition. The first thing a prospect tries to do is provoke you about your competition. Say, oh, but you know, that which company do you work for? Eastman. And who's your competitor? Hero. Ah, but Hero makes such wonderful. Hero is the world's #1 cycle manufacturer. Eastman? Who's ever heard of you? Why would I want to pay you 2,350 for the cycle, but I can get a Hero for 2,800? He's provoked you. There you go, the first mistake he made. He started talking about Hero. The 90% of the sales conversation now will Hero. Who is his competitor? And what happened to Eastman? He just went west out of the window. Alright? So don't fall for that bait. Say, yes sir, we are number 2 and Hero is number 1. In fact, this reminds me of a campaign that Avis and Hertz ran. You know, there are 2 car rental companies in the US. Number 1 was Hertz and number 2 was Avis. So Avis ran an ad campaign that said, we are number 2, therefore we try harder. And the body copy said, if you look at our ashtrays, they're always clean. You look at our cars, they're polished and new. You look at the upholstery, it doesn't smell of second-hand smoke. And everything's spick and span because we are number 2. We try harder to please you. Within 6 months of that campaign, Avis became the number 1 car rental company. So every bloke said, if I'm going to rent a car, I better rent a cleaner car and a better car. Why the hell should I go for the Hertz? Because that was a perception created. So there's no harm in being number 2. So I would start off by, like for you,